So Shams tweeted about an hour ago saying Jrue Holiday is potentially going to get moved to a contender. And based on his wording in the tweet, it seems like it's going to happen. Several contenders are in talks with the Pelicans. And I think it's also worth exploring teams that are in the lottery this season perhaps making a move for Jrue. And the reason I say that is because I don't think it's a certainty that Jrue will decline his 2022 player option. Now, if teams get a sense that he will, then I think that narrows the playing field to just contenders. As for why the Pelicans would do this, well, the idea is that Holiday is not on Ingram and Zion's timelines, and I mean, you could argue that without Jrue, the Pelicans are not going to be that good, which I am a little fearful of, but I can understand why this is out there, because I do think you could get something pretty decent for Jrue, and now all we can do is speculate. I mean, you think about the Nets with Karis LeVert, you think about the Bucks. I mean, they were already in the rumors for Victor Oladipo. I think Jrue would be a huge upgrade over Bledsoe if he was going to be the point guard. He would also work as the two guard. We'll get into the specifics of moves in a second, but I think the Nuggets are probably my favorite team for Jrue, partially because it keeps him in the Western Conference, so my Celtics don't have to deal with him. But to speak on the Eastern Conference, let's just start with the Nets. I think Jrue fits there for pretty obvious reasons. There's Dinwiddie and there's LeVert. I doubt the Nets would want to give up both of them for Jrue Holiday. But if you're the Pelicans, I think you could get one. Between the two of them, I think Karis has a higher ceiling than Dinwiddie, but I'm just so freaked out by LeVert's injuries that I would probably rather have Dinwiddie, especially because if I'm losing Jrue, then I'm going to want another playmaker back, and Dinwiddie is that, of course. And I think regardless of whether you want to go with Dinwiddie or LeVert, I would say Taurean Prince is probably the guy to make the money work. Now, maybe the Nets hold Taurean Prince in very high regard, but to me, like Spencer Dinwiddie and Taurean Prince for Jrue Holiday seems pretty alright. Now, maybe it would be Karis and Taurean Prince. If we go to the Bucks, Bledsoe to the Pelicans would be, I guess, cool. I mean, we know about Bledsoe's problems in the playoffs, but if you're the Pelicans and you look at Bledsoe can just be a nice point guard for you, and maybe he's not even the long-term option, but he can at least hold the fort down as you figure it out. And on top of Bledsoe, I would imagine the Pelicans would want DiVincenzo. Maybe they think DJ Wilson can be a player, I don't know. And then Ilyasova or Robin Lopez's money, I'm pretty sure that makes the move work. The Bucks do have the Pacers pick, and I don't think the Bucks would be too beat up about giving up that pick, because, I mean, we understand the situation with Giannis's contract. I don't think it's really possible for them to make this sort of move without giving up Bledsoe, and that's mainly just because of the money, unless they were going to give up Lopez, but I don't think they want to do that. If we go to Denver, who is, again, my favorite Jrue team, unfortunately, Gary Harris's offense has fallen off the last 2 years. I think if he was still that 15, 16 a game guy, then this would be a little easier to see. Maybe the Pelicans would really love Monte Morris. I mean, I know he's not a household name, but I do think if you gave him a nice 30 minutes a game as your starting point guard, he could be pretty damn good for you. He's, of course, one of the most efficient passers in the league. But I can't get around that without Gary Harris being in the move, it gets pretty tough to find the Jrue to Denver deal. I mean, Will Barton and Monte Morris's contracts add up to about 15, 16 million or whatever it is, and maybe that just squeaks into whatever the percentage it needs to be in comparison to the money you're taking back. So, I don't know. Denver does have all their picks. I think it is time for Denver to consider moving some of them. If we can bounce back to the Eastern Conference, Miami, I think they've been at least talked about a bit with Jrue, even before this report came out. I think Tyler Hero would be the determining factor here. They're definitely not giving up Bam. Kendrick Nunn's not good enough. The Iguodala money as well as Olynyk's money makes it work. And for what it's worth, I mean, Olynyk at center kind of makes sense next to Zion. Now, maybe Olynyk is just simply not good enough to be a starting center like that, but the fit at least makes sense. But again, I think it just comes down to Tyler Hero. Would I move Hero if I was Miami for Jrue? I would not. If Jrue was a couple years younger, I would. But that's just me. We'll see what they want to do. I wonder if Philly has a shot here. It would have to be the Pelicans thinking that Horford is their perfect center, but he's even older than Jrue is. Now maybe the Pelicans would just really want Tobias, but I don't think so. With that contract, I'm going to go with no. Could the Clippers find a way into this? I mean, if the center of a return for the Pelicans was a Montrez sign-and trade, maybe, but Montrez next to Zion, I don't know if that's the best fit. I imagine Shamet would have to be moving in that, and, well, that's kind of it. The Clippers, of course, do not really have picks to give up here. Maybe Beverly would be moving as well. Jrue in Dallas would be really cool, but I don't know if there's a move there. I mean, Tim Hardaway Jr. is the easy contract, but I mean, if Jrue is available, then I'm assuming I can get better than him if I'm the Pelicans. They're not a contender, but I wonder if Phoenix would jump in on this sort of thing. They, of course, have Oubre, who I think the Pelicans would be interested in. And I know I've been on the Rubio train, but Jrue in some ways is basically a better version of Rubio, so I would be okay with that. Because I'm mentioning a lottery team in Phoenix, I'll mention one in Atlanta as well. I mean, the Hawks want to move the 6th pick. As far as the money for Atlanta, it would be Dedmon's contract, and you might have to put DeAndre Hunter in there because he's making about $7 million. Whether the Hawks would want to do that, I don't know, but Jrue would be a huge upgrade over whatever young guy they want to give up to help out Trae Young. Do we think the Wolves would give up the 1st pick for Jrue? I mean, it would be that instant improvement that I'm sure they want. I don't know if they have a player that the Pelicans would really want, but maybe the 1st pick is high enough to where they would take that plus James Johnson's contract and whatever else to make the money work. I could picture them arguing about Malik Beasley in a move like that. Just to mention the Warriors real quick, their trade exception is $17 million, so that doesn't work for Jrue's money. If the Pelicans really liked Wiggins, then that's a possibility, but I don't think that's going to happen, so I would say the Warriors are not in on this one. If I think about Toronto, I mean, if it was a Van Fleet sign and trade, I think they would be definitely interested in that. If it wasn't going to be that, it would be an Ibaka sign and trade, and you would hope to get Norman Powell as well. Ibaka's a good fit next to Zion, but he's over 30 years old as well. I don't know if the Pelicans would be really about that. The Celtics, I mean, unless it would be a Hayward for Jrue swap, which if you're the Pelicans, you're basically in the same position as when you had Jrue, so I don't know why you'd do that. The Pacers, I mean, if the heart of the move was Turner or Sabonis, then perhaps the Pelicans would consider that one. In the West, I mean, Houston, they just don't have the assets for Jrue. The Lakers don't. I don't think the Jazz have anything the Pelicans would want. And the Blazers, I don't think they've got anything the Pelicans would really want either. Could I picture a Buddy Hield for Jrue move? Maybe, I guess. If I had to speculate on one team, I feel like it's the Nets. I think there would be desperation for them to make a move, and I think they would be willing to move one of Karras or Dinwiddie. If I was the Pelicans, I would want Dinwiddie, because then he could replace a lot of the shot creation that Jrue gave me. Still need more money to make the move work, but that would be the heart of the move. So yeah, man, this is an interesting one. We'll see what happens.